This is just always a wonderful opportunity to share the Dharma, see all these old and new friends. We go back probably kalpas, as far as I know. And so, what I'd like to talk to you about tonight, my working title is the Preliminaries to Practice. And the premise is that whether you're a beginner or someone who has practiced a very long time, you can always revisit what your understanding is. You can revisit how you're practicing and what you know, what you think you know, what you don't know. There are just many ways that we can approach this. And I'm going to concentrate on about four areas in my talk. Basically, I'm going to analyze kind of our condition, which is an introduction to it. But then I'll be talking about right view, great faith, great effort, and great doubt. And so I hope this will be of help to everyone. So what I want to first point out is that even if we've been studying for a long time, we as I mentioned, we can come back and people know these phrases of like beginner's mind, ordinary mind, non-conceptual awareness. And some of what I hope to do in the talk is to let us question the way that we understand these terms. We're often kind of caught up in the terms themselves, and I'm talking about myself also in doing this. It's a real potential pitfall because we sometimes can approach the Dharma almost like we're approaching an academic course like biology or history or who knows what. And we come to learn the terms and we put them together and we can somehow forget or not see the underlying reality. And so that's kind of what I'm addressing in my talk. And throughout this talk, I'm going to be talking about a number of things, and I hope not too many. I hope we'll finish before Wednesday, let's say. And so I want to make sure, excuse me, that there, the overriding thing is you understand that this is a Chan talk about Mahayana, and at the back of the talk and in the middle and in the front, there is this idea that we are working for not only our own liberation, but that of all sentient beings. So even though I'm going to get caught in some of the technicalities, but I'll always try to bring it up and make sure that it remains front and center. So here we're looking at the plight of us sentient beings, right? We think we know things, but we tend to hold on to whatever seems to come into our mind, what presents itself to our senses. We forget that when we see something or hear something, we're taking a mental projection of it. And rather than being with the thing itself, the thing that was actually in reality, we're in the realm of our own deluded mind. And then we become beclouded with the three poisons. Now, I'm assuming that everyone here, has a pretty good background in Buddhism. So I hope that no one will be left behind. I try to avoid what's called mego, MEGO. My eyes glaze over, right? So that you stay and you stay with me. And I have, as an assistant, I have this assistant who is a non-sentient or a semi-sentient being, and I can always tell that if I'm starting to bore people, he starts to kind of fold over and go to sleep. So hello, right? So that's something I just want you to know that I'm going to be try to be as vigilant as I can so that I don't put this this stuffy to sleep. Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's continue. So Well, talking about dukkha, right? It's a really interesting term, if you will, because it's untranslatable, right? It says in the sutras that the dukkha is the five skandhas. It's like how we are put together, and so it's such a wide-ranging term and a wide-ranging insight that it's very easy for us to miss it. So we can think that we're really practicing well, but we can easily be fooling ourselves. And my personal translation of dukkha is you're fooling yourself. So there's a story of these are Western monks. They're standing around Brother John, who is lying on a table in his last moments of life. He's dying, and everyone is talking about him, about how pious he was, how generous, how thoughtful. And Brother John props himself up on his elbow and says, "Don't forget my humility." So here we have someone who is, I like to take these stories and look at them as if they're actually real, that he really thought that he was practicing in this case, really being, I'm translating this from Western to Buddhist, but being sincere and detached when he's kind of the epitome of attachment. So these kind of perceptions that we have in our mind are really, as Sariputra said to Buddha, they're deceptions. We think they're perceptions, but from the Buddha Dharma point of view, they're deceptions because we hold on to them. We do it with a sense of self, and the sense of self that we have is really not apparent to us because we've had so much conditioning, developed so many habitual tendencies that it just fades into the woodwork, and we sort of hope something will come and save us. This kind of self-deception is illustrated by this story of the Mullah Nasruddin. He's a Sufi figure. A Sufi is a mystical branch of Islam, and he's kind of a wise man and a fool all tied up together. And he's in his kitchen, and a lot of his students have come over, and they see that he's sitting at the table with a bowl of red hot peppers, and he's eating one after the other. And sweat is pouring down his face. You can see the steam rising from his forehead, and he's turning red. And his students in horror say, "Mullah, what are you doing?" And he looks at them sheepishly and says, "I'm waiting for a sweet one." And this is, another, just to illustrate this, because this is a lot of fun. One of my favorite Jewish proverbs is that you have to wait with your mouth open for a very long time before a roast chicken flies in, right? Doesn't happen too often. So, sometimes, somehow we kind of want practice to happen for us, I think. And I'm talking about even having done this for decades. You sort of hope things that will kind of transpire. You give whatever effort that you can, but you really are doing it in somewhat of a half-hearted way, perhaps. Maybe you are sort of stuck in your meditation, what we call a ghost cave, and you're kind of lacking right view. But the good news, of course, is that we have Buddha Dharma to help us with this misinformation that we're feeding ourselves, and the world also is feeding us a lot of misinformation, which we're taking to be truth. Now, in the general practice, we have the Four Noble Truths and the 5 precepts, which I will later really emphasize as the foundation of our practice. And we have Praticca Samutpada, causes and conditions, just like the Theravadins. But as I said, in Chan, we go the further step with the Mahayana, and we see all beings as connected, no self and no other. And we can take, and it's certainly recommended, the Bodhisattva precepts, so that our liberation is in concert with everyone else's liberation. This is very important for a Chan practitioner. So let's, so as I said, I'm going to talk about faith, effort, and doubt. And this was articulated by Philip Kapleau, a great American Roshi, and which he got from his teacher, Yasutani Roshi, sometimes called great faith, great determination, great doubt. And I'll go into the terms in greater detail, of course. So let's begin with right view. And I can't emphasize enough, but I will try to emphasize enough how important this is. Now, I think most people know that right view is the first in the Eightfold Path. And of course, in the Theravadan schools, it's fairly straightforward. To have right view is to thoroughly understand the Four Noble Truths, and you have precepts, and you have conditioned arising as well. But it can be a much wider, much deeper, much less identifiable, if you will, kind of understanding. So one of the problems with understanding right view is it's got a number assigned to it. You know, it's number one in the Eightfold Path. And you may have heard this quip that Christians love God, but Buddhists love lists. So here's a list. And once again, by the fact that it's on a list, starts, in my mind, to make it a little bit academic, that, you know, you kind of memorize it, you know what the attributes are, but you might be missing what right view really is. And it's very important. Right view is the beginning, it's the middle, and the end of our practice. So I'll try to go through it a little bit in greater detail. One really important thing that is hard to understand is that right view is not a view. It's not an opinion. You know, in our language, we say, you know, in my view, you know, XYZ is the greatest XYZ in the whole world, right? We're really keyed into our opinions. And of course, as it says in Faith and Mind, the great way is not difficult if only you don't pick or choose. And some translations of that say, if you don't have opinions. And that also is hard to understand because it's getting to a very deep level of straightforward mind. So right view cannot be described, but it can be pointed to. Now, that is not as mystical or strange a statement as it might sound. For example, I have some tea here, which I'm now going to sip. If I tried for many kalpas to describe to you what it felt like to drink this tea and to taste the tea, you would never have the sense that I'm having at this moment. And believe me, drinking a cup of tea is not a great spiritual accomplishment. It's a very simple act. But what it is experience. And it can be pointed to by, you know, what I just said. I'm drinking tea, I'm tasting tea, I'm swallowing tea. But those words are not the same as the experience. So that's very important in understanding what right view is, because otherwise we get caught up in the concepts. And of course, right view is non-conceptual. This stuff gets very tricky, right? Because the word non-conceptual is itself a concept. So you can't get fooled by this. You have to look, you know, beneath the hood, beneath the surface. Another thing where right view is described, especially in Chan and non-dualistic traditions is that it is mind itself. And when you hear the word, at least when I hear the word, everything is mind, I get migo, my eyes glaze over, because it's a very, very abstract word. But if you approach it, now I'm not saying that what I'm about to say is a perfect description of mind, but I would say it could be a gateway. If you look at your experience of things as mind, then you're a little bit less likely to label it and categorize as you might if you try to figure out what it is conceptually. So, mind, when it's said that, to know all the Buddhas of the past, present, and future, perceive that Dharma, Dhatu, nature is all created by the mind. When I first heard that, I scratched my head and I thought, well, does that mean I just thought up my computer, like Harry Potter? Like I created my car by thinking about it? Obviously, that's ridiculous. My mind isn't that powerful anyway. It's really about how we're perceiving the world. So for some reason, when we hear everything is created by the mind, we jump to the material world, and in examples that I just gave. I thought up my coffee cup. I thought up the windows in my house, right? That's at least I do, and I think a lot of other people jump to that. But if you think about what our life really is, it's not about material things. It's about what really constitutes our lives. Sincerity, lies, hope, fear, understanding, love. All of these things you can't experience with your eyes, ears, tongue, a touch of your body. The only way you experience them is through your mind. And even if it is a material object, you're still experiencing it either through touch or through hearing or through sight or through taste or smell. I left that out. But that's all taken by your sixth consciousness, and it's synthesized into a projection in the mind, which, I mean, without getting too complicated, but that is what it is. It's a projection in the mind, and we really, really think that it is real. And, it's like Tsakni Rinpoche said, addressing his audience, he said, all of you think that you're real. And he said, that's true. The problem is that you think you're really real. And that's where all the suffering comes in. So, we have to take a lot of this with a light touch. And also understand that, mind and body, material and body, they're not the same. They're not different. But there's certainly not the way that we think they are, because we hold on to our opinions, which cause fights and unfortunately wars and bloodshed, as we're seeing in the world. And it really comes from little ideas growing into great horrific ideas in the mind. So this idea that the mind is the heart of right view explains the Mahayana view of interconnectedness. That is, nothing is left out of mind. And of course, another thing that is a little confusing about using the word mind is it doesn't necessarily mean my mind or your mind, although those are included, but it means mind itself. And that is not an easy thing, and forgive the pun, to get your mind around, right? But this is what our practice is about in many ways. So what it comes down to is that right view is the absence of all views. Everything else is some point of view. So, and even in saying what I just said, because I said it in concepts, there's a level to which what I said, no matter how correct it might be in essence, it's still wrong. This is what makes practicing the Dharma so much fun, right? You can't take things too seriously at first, right? You have to step away from your perceptions, which is what I'm trying to do right now. Um, so it's really living um, without thoughts or concepts. I was on a retreat just recently with Zarko, and at one point in my interview, he looked at me. He said, "Can you stop thinking?" And well, for a few minutes, I could, for a moment too. And it's really kind of a different world when you're uh, when you're in the world and the world is in you, and you're not getting interrupted or you or your views distorted by concepts. So right view is also cause and effect, praticca samutpada. This is what the Buddha said: if you see causes and effect, you'll see me. And what that means, of course, is that what we as ordinary sentient beings usually encounter, it's conditioned. It doesn't have self-nature. And that is affected by the fact that things are impermanent. So things are continually appearing and disappearing, in our minds and in the world in a certain way. And to be able to see that with right view is ultimately to see the way the Buddha sees. Now, this is what I've been told, right? I'm not my Buddhahood is postponed until at least next week, or probably maybe the month after. Not entirely sure. It's not on my calendar. And so what right view is, is the like the Buddha is the mother of prajna paramita, the wisdom that is beyond wisdom, the wisdom of non-conceptuality, the wisdom of right view. So, and I just want to reiterate. So, in the past, when I've learned about right view, you read it and then you say, okay, I understand it. And then a week later, you say, wait a second. Did I really get that right? And you have to go back and read some things again. I'm just pointing out that it's a difficult thing because it's not a concept. It's our life as it really is. And that's quite an undertaking. So now with right view, you can then have great faith, right? Right view is really the source of great faith. So that's a belief, a deep belief in Buddha nature, translated in other ways into our great potential, that we're not who we think we are, that our limitations are products of our mind. Now, that doesn't mean that the way we are in our physical body with the brains that we are given, that somehow we could just become a computer genius if we meditated well. It doesn't mean that. It means something a lot deeper, that there is an end to our suffering, and others have done it. Of course, the Buddha did it, and many great teachers and sages since the Buddha, right up to Master Shengyen, who is the founder of Dharma Drum, who was just a remarkable embodiment of the Dharma, in ways that was hard to perceive. Right? I remember once, very moving thing that Sherpa once did. He was standing in front of us, and he said, "You can't see the Dharma. I'm sorry, you can't see the Buddha. You can't see the Dharma." He said, "Only the Sangha." And he sort of raised his hands like this, as it's kind of the responsibility that he carried, that he took on, and he once again, that he embodied, was really, it's one of the ways that we can sort of get glimpses of the way things really are. So that belief in Buddha nature, that great deep faith, also includes doubt and disbelief, which I'll get to, later. And the idea of having this deep belief can also cut through the problems of our self-judgment, our poor self-image, which so many, including yours truly, have dealt with. Things that it's like, there's the Chinese expression, which I don't remember the Chinese, but it's throwing out the anchor and then starting to row. This is kind of what we often do. We're often our worst enemies. So this deep faith is an antidote to that. And remember, the antidotes are only antidotes until when you really, really use them and understand them. Otherwise, they can be poisonous, right? Because you attach to some expectation. And so our inquiring mind is the mind of Buddha nature, the mind that is really open. So when Dongshang Liangzhe left his teacher, Yun Yuan, and Dongshan said to him, how shall I characterize your teaching? And Yun Yuan said to him, just this. Now, sometimes people understand that as, well, just open your eyes, open your senses, don't conceptualize, don't be attached, and be with what is happening in the moment. And it certainly has that understanding. But it also has another understanding, because at that moment, Dongshan was looking at his teacher with this mind of inquiry. And Yen Yen pointed right, he said, just this. And so one interpretation of that moment is that mind which is not resting in concepts. That's my teaching. And then, of course, you can develop an understanding, convictions, that others have transformed their suffering. And I also want to emphasize that this is a gradual process. It fades and appears. It starts to take on dimensionality. It loses dimensionality, but it's something, because of the faith, there's an underlying virya, right? That's where our word for virile comes from, an underlying effort. And virya, one of the 6 paramitas, and I can't talk about everything, but I think a lot of people know about that, is understood not just as grin and bear it effort, but it's joyful effort. It's effort that is tied to all of the other paramitas and to right view. So with the right view, you see that this determination is always warranted, will always come through for you. And then, of course, this great faith leads to the gateways of emptiness, formlessness, wishlessness. And Shifu talks about these in greater detail than I can go into them in his book, There Is No Suffering, and of course, many other places. And so non-conceptuality itself, non-attachment, non-duality, these become possible with great faith. And this, by the way, it's important to know, this is the absence of skeptical doubt, which is, even, the language is funny. They're both doubt, but there's the kind of doubt which says, well, I can't do it. And that person can do it because they're so much smarter or stronger or wealthier than I am, and I might as well not even try. That's a kind of debilitating doubt. The doubt that we're going to talk about is more the doubt of the open mind. And with this faith, you can really live in the present moment and see that the present moment is not unconnected to all other moments. And like Dogen Zenji said, you don't even you leave past, present, and future behind with that kind of view. So with great faith, then we can develop strong determination. You can understand what a vow is and make great vows for your liberation and the liberation of all living beings. And then you can be able to exercise the four noble exertions. And this is now getting down to the real nitty-gritty of practice. I have been speaking, as much as I've been talking about non-conceptuality and non-attachment, I've been speaking in vague terms, right? And I guess I'm going to continue, but at least these terms are a little bit more specific about the four noble exertions, which can work in the practice on our cushions and off our cushions. So I'll just go over them because they're very important. So we can detach from unwholesome thoughts or views. And actually, this is a good point. I didn't talk about this in the beginning, but it's never too late. Just what the word right means. This is often misconstrued, right? Because right doesn't mean right or wrong, or true or false. It means right in the sense of correct, or as one teacher put it, as sound, as like this, the floor is sound, it holds up, it's built well. Another way that right is understood is like the right tool, right? If you want to screw in a screw, you don't use a hammer, although you can, but it's going to be more effective if you use a screwdriver, or you use a saw and not a hammer to saw wood. But that's what the right is. So the unwholesome in this case means things that bring harm, that are disruptive, diluting, causing dukkha to yourself and others. Those, and now we're working once again on the meditative level, on the thought level, and of course, actions follow. But in meditation, in everyday life, you can monitor your mind. One term I think is very important, with all of the terms with mindfulness, is the term apramata, which means vigilant. You can develop a vigilant mind so that you see thoughts coming in, and when it's an unwholesome thought that could be about doing harm or whatever, you're able to let itself extinguish. You give it no credence. You let it die. You let the unwholesome thought die. That's the first noble exertion. The second is that you keep such things from arising in the mind as best you can. And remember, all of these things happen sometimes successfully and sometimes unsuccessfully, but we're in the right effort and right determination. So you're aware of that. You're aware of how the mind works and how much work you might have to do. So you try to keep the unwholesome from your mind, and you try to engender wholesome thoughts, so that those are thoughts of practicing, of helping others, of generosity, of explaining things to people, whatever things that make your life and the lives of other people better. That's a wholesome thought. So you try to generate that. And then the fourth noble exertion is to maintain those kind of thoughts, have a mind that is generally wholesome. And, you practice ahimsa, which is non-harming. And, that Sherpa always used to say the very first concern he would have before he thought about who would benefit or who wouldn't benefit, it would be, would any of his actions actually cause harm? And you have to be very aware to see that, and beware of, your, open quotes, good intentions, right? The famous story of the Good Samaritan who helps the old man or old lady cross the street, struggling all the way across, and she hits him over the head with her umbrella because she was waiting on the other side of the road for a bus, right? You've got to really question and receive. This is a not living in your own bubble mind. So this kind of work of strong effort, determination, can really open up your resourcefulness and your creativity in continuing with your vows. And you can deal more effectively with negative emotions and fear, anger, and hatred. Just want to share an interesting thing. I'm teaching in another place. I'm teaching Charlotte Joko book's Everyday Zen, and she had an interesting passage about dealing with anger. So you can contemplate this example. She said that when you're angry, you should be totally angry. Embrace it. Now, which sounds kind of contrary to what one would think, but she said that way, that kind of anger, and you have to hold on, let me finish, that kind of anger doesn't hurt anybody. What she said was the kind of anger that hurts people is when you suppress things and you're seething inside and you're being insincere. But if you really see things arising in your mind, you recognize that that's what they are, and you can see that they are mind-based, and therefore they can be mind eliminated. Then I guess it's like, thoroughly cleaning a room, with there are piles of dust and you're getting out every last speck. Anyway, so that's an interesting view of dealing with, anger and negative emotions. And then understanding and implementing the precepts. This is, and I would say, I didn't sort of start the talk like this, if you will, but the precepts really underlie everything that I'm saying here. And, as sometimes it's said, there really is one precept, mind itself, if you will. And Zheng Yan, the founder of Ziji, said that the precepts are who we really are. So to practice them is to be able to catch unwholesome behavior and rectify or atone for it, and to foster wholesome behavior. I mean, the 5 precepts are the progenitors or the handmaidens of the 4 noble exertions. And I think we all know the 5 main precepts of not killing, not stealing, not lying, no sexual misconduct, and no intoxicating drugs. And also just a little plug for the 5 precepts. They can always be understood more clearly and more thoroughly. Killing is not, of course, killing your neighbor, or people, or even smaller sentient beings. You can also kill ideas. You can kill joy. You can, snuff out other things in the world, and you can steal what was not freely given, and that could be ideas. It could be responsibility. It could be blame. It can be a lot of things. Same with lying is just replete with actually lying sort of speaks for itself. You're really distorting the world in either gross or subtle ways, but nonetheless that's a very important precept. And of course, intoxication isn't just drugs or alcohol. You can be intoxicated with the internet, or with video games, or with some hobby. Anything that sort of takes over the mind conceptually can be understood as intoxication. So I just want to give the 5 precepts a good plug, from my sponsor, who's the Buddha, right? This program has been brought to you by the Buddha. So the Tibetans say, keep your views as wide as space and your actions as fine as flour, Flour, right? So Your views as wide as space, of course, is right view, right? It's uh, views that are unattached, hardly even getting the name of views, but having awareness, right? No view doesn't mean you're a zombie. No view means that you're clear on what you're encountering. And then your actions is fine as flower. That's really a kind of description of the precepts and the four noble exertions in action, right? Because you're really monitoring what you're actually doing in body, speech, and mind. Um, so when Shifu said, give your body to the cushion, your mind to the method, you can really extrapolate that as your body not just to the cushion, but your body to the world and to other beings. And the method, um, could be mind itself. The method, whatever it is that frees you up, and we of course we have our particular methods that we all use, whether it's counting the breath or saying the Buddha's name or Huato or silent illumination. So now we get to great doubt. So great doubt is to work with great faith and great effort or determination. So nothing is taken for anything other than what it is. This is really don't know mind. This is bare attention. This is a mind that is continually saying, as Sherfu would say as he practiced, this is not my destination, or as another master said, not yet. Right? You see things in, and this is really about not getting fooled. But once again, it's not so much a practice as it is a way of living. So once again, it's one of these things that, because it's got a name, it's got a category, but doubt is kind of beyond that. And of course, people who have studied Chan know that, especially in Wato practice, it's often spoken about how you try to develop great doubt. But as Master, it's either Huangbo or Bohan, I don't quite remember, says that the doubt sensation can be developed in very minute ways. It doesn't have to be this incredible blast, which of course is something which is very auspicious in our practice. But I guess you can use great doubt if you're in the supermarket and just looking, picking up different tomato sauces, just questioning, what the ingredients are. That might be a little too mundane, but doubt is really important. And so what this doubt does, it helps us to wake up from the dream of our existence. Now that way of understanding things, actually in the Tibetan practice of Lojong, it's the second slogan, see everything as a dream. And that has always driven me a little crazy, because as a Dharma teacher, I really want to be clear and explain things. And I've always felt that, if somebody is standing next to a radiator and they're hot, you can say, well, move away from the radiator. But if you say to somebody, you're living in a dream, it's kind of, what are you talking about? So I've, in sort of dealing with that, I think if you understand the idea of being in a dream as the idea that you're in a state of attachment. Of course, you don't know it, but with a lot of these tools and teachings that I've talked about tonight, you can see that. You can see the dreamlike nature. That it's not a dream like, if I dreamed of a tiger and I see you the next day, you'll say, that tiger had pink stripes, not red stripes, as you thought, right? It's not that kind of a dream. It's the dream of the just general delusion, right? That I think that's a good way of understanding what the dream is. So As I start coming towards the end of my talk, I just want to give or read a poem by, or actually a couple poems by San Sung, who was the great Korean master. So he has a very short series of lyrics which says, coming empty-handed, going empty-handed. This is human. So that's something you can, he's really covering everything in those three lines, coming and going. There is, what else is there? And even, perhaps there isn't even that, but that's who we are. We come into the world with nothing, we leave the world with nothing. Everything else is just so much scenery that the self passes through. And then here's a longer poem by Song Sung. When you are born, where do you come from? When you die, where do you go? Life is like a floating cloud which appears. Death is like a floating cloud which disappears. The floating cloud originally does not exist. Life and death, coming and going, are also like this. But there is one thing which always remains clear. It's pure and clear, not depending on life and death. Then what is that one pure and clear thing that pulls this body around? So just write that down and mail the answer to me. Right? That's exercising the great doubt. So just to summarize, I said, I wanted to take a fresh look at practice. I mentioned some of the assumptions that we make and the views that we hold on to, which is this formula, this unfortunate formula we have for dukkha and our suffering. And then I started to speak about the antidotes with special emphasis on right view, so that we see what is really before us, not what we want or what we don't want. Then I talked about great faith, right? A deep belief that there is a way out of our suffering, and we can help ourselves and all sentient beings, and that's based on right view. And then from right view and right faith comes great doubt, which is something that leads to and is indicative of the liberated mind. So that about concludes my talk. I hope it's helpful to people, and I really appreciate. Wait, Len, let me just make sure. Did you 1 second? Did you hear everything I said? No. You have to work on your practice. Like, show people how well you meditate. Look at that. Look at that posture. There we go. So good. That's it. Thank you. There he goes. So